The email arrived at 3:47 p.m. on a Tuesday. Subject line: Immediate termination. Effective today. I stared at my laptop screen in the corner office of the 42nd floor, watching the Manhattan skyline blur through tears I refused to let fall. 2 hours. That's all the time left before I was supposed to close the biggest deal of my career. A $2.8 billion IPO that would make Technova Industries a household name and secure my legacy as one of the youngest chief financial officers to ever take a company public. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. Instead, I was being escorted out by security, my access badges deactivated, my company phone confiscated. But they made one critical mistake. They forgot about the personal relationships I'd built over 7 years of blood, sweat, and 18-hour days. And they definitely didn't know about the conversation I was about to have with Marcus Chen, the CEO of their biggest competitor. What happened next would change everything, not just for me, but for the entire tech industry. 7 years earlier, I walked into Technova Industries as a junior analyst fresh out of Northwestern's Kellogg School of Management. The company occupied 3 floors of a converted warehouse in Austin, Texas, and the entire operation ran on the kind of entrepreneurial chaos that only exists in early-stage startups. Coffee-stained whiteboards covered every wall. Programmers worked barefoot at standing desks made from Amazon boxes and plywood, and the conference rooms were named after different types of tacos. I was 25 years old, armed with a finance degree and enough student loan debt to buy a small house. My interview had been unconventional. Instead of the usual corporate interrogation, I spent 4 hours debugging financial models with the existing team and presenting a market analysis I'd prepared on the spot. When Bradley Morrison, Technova's founder and CEO, offered me the position, he did it over breakfast tacos from a food truck parked outside the building. "Vanessa," he said, hot sauce dripping down his chin, "you're going to help us build something extraordinary. This isn't just another software company. We're going to revolutionize how businesses handle data integration, and we're going to do it faster and better than anyone else in the market." Technova's flagship product was called DataBridge, a cloud-based platform that allowed companies to seamlessly integrate data from dozens of different sources without the usual technical nightmares. While competitors like Oracle and IBM offered similar solutions, they were expensive, complicated, and required teams of consultants to implement. DataBridge was different. It was intuitive, affordable, and could be set up by any reasonably tech-savvy employee in a matter of hours. The market timing was perfect. Companies were drowning in data from social media, e-commerce platforms, customer relationship management systems, and legacy databases that didn't communicate with each other. DataBridge solved this problem elegantly, using artificial intelligence to automatically map data relationships and create real-time dashboards that actually made sense to non-technical users. My first assignment was to build financial models projecting our growth over the next 5 years. I spent weeks analyzing market research, competitor pricing strategies, and customer acquisition costs. The numbers were staggering. If we could capture even 3% of the enterprise data integration market, we'd be looking at annual revenues exceeding $500 million within 4 years. But numbers on a spreadsheet meant nothing without execution. Bradley had assembled a team of engineers who'd previously worked at companies like Microsoft, Google, and Amazon. Our head of engineering, Sarah Kim, had been instrumental in developing Azure's data services. Our VP of Sales, Robert Martinez, had built the enterprise sales team at Salesforce from 12 people to over 300. These weren't fresh graduates looking for their first big break. These were seasoned professionals who'd walked away from comfortable, 6-figure salaries because they believed in what we were building. The early days were exhilarating and exhausting in equal measure. I typically arrived at the office by 6:30 a.m. and rarely left before 10 p.m. Weekends were spent refining our pricing models, analyzing competitor moves, and preparing financial reports for our board of directors. We raised our Series A funding round, $12 million from a combination of venture capital firms and angel investors, 6 months after I joined the company. The funding allowed us to expand our team and accelerate product development. We moved into a proper office building in downtown Austin, complete with actual conference rooms, a professional kitchen, and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Lady Bird Lake. I was promoted to senior financial analyst and given responsibility for managing our relationships with investors and potential strategic partners. Our first major breakthrough came 18 months after launch. Dell Technologies, headquartered just 30 miles north in Round Rock, agreed to pilot DataBridge across their global supply chain operations. The pilot was supposed to last 3 months and cover 5 manufacturing facilities. Instead, Dell was so impressed with the results that they expanded the implementation to 47 locations across 12 countries and signed a 3-year contract worth $18 million. Word travels fast in the enterprise software world. Within 6 months of the Dell announcement, we had signed contracts with American Airlines, Whole Foods, and Charles Schwab. Our annual recurring revenue grew from $2.3 million to $31 million in 18 months. We raised our Series B round, $45 million led by Sequoia Capital, and I was promoted to Director of Finance. The growth was intoxicating, but it also created new challenges. Managing cash flow became increasingly complex as we balanced rapid hiring with the need to maintain 18 months of operating expenses in reserve. We were spending $3.2 million per month on salaries, office space, and marketing, while revenue was growing at 15% month over month, but with the typical enterprise software lag between contract signing and revenue recognition. I spent countless hours building sophisticated financial models that could predict our cash needs 6 quarters in advance. The models had to account for seasonal variations in enterprise purchasing decisions, the impact of economic uncertainty on deal closure rates, and the complex revenue recognition requirements for multi-year contracts with different payment terms. My Sao. Expertise in financial modeling and strategic planning caught Bradley's attention. He began including me in high-level strategic discussions about market expansion, potential acquisitions, and long-term competitive positioning. When our chief financial officer left to join a portfolio company at Andreessen Horowitz, Bradley asked me to step into the role on an interim basis. I was 28 years old and suddenly responsible for the financial operations of a company valued at $180 million. The learning curve was steep. I had to master complex accounting standards, manage relationships with our auditing firm and legal counsel, and present quarterly financial reports to a board of directors that included some of the most successful venture capitalists in Silicon Valley. The interim CFO role became permanent 6 months later, making me one of the youngest chief financial officers in the enterprise software industry. The promotion came with a significant equity stake, options to purchase 1.2% of the company at a strike price of $3.50 per share. If we could successfully go public at the valuations we were discussing, those options would be worth tens of millions of dollars. Going public had always been part of Bradley's long-term vision for Teknova. The enterprise software market was experiencing unprecedented growth, driven by digital transformation initiatives accelerated by the pandemic. Companies that had postponed technology upgrades for years were suddenly approving million-dollar software purchases to enable remote work and improve operational efficiency. Our Series C funding round in late 2022 raised $120 million at a $1.4 billion valuation, officially making Teknova a unicorn startup. The round was led by Tiger Global Management and included participation from existing investors, plus new strategic investors like Salesforce Ventures and Microsoft's venture capital arm. The unicorn status brought new pressures and opportunities. We were suddenly competing for talent with companies like Snowflake and Databricks, which meant offering competitive salaries and equity packages to attract senior engineers and sales professionals. Our headcount grew from 180 employees to over 400 in 12 months. Managing this growth required sophisticated financial planning and operational discipline. I implemented new budgeting processes, hired a team of financial analysts, and worked with our human resources team to develop compensation frameworks that could scale with our rapid expansion. We opened offices in San Francisco, New York, and London to support our growing international customer base. Revenue growth continued to accelerate. We ended 2023 with $127 million in annual recurring revenue, up from $54 million the previous year. Our customer base included over 300 enterprise clients across industries ranging from healthcare and financial services to manufacturing and retail. The average contract value had grown to $340,000 annually, with our largest customers paying over $2 million per year for enterprise-wide implementations. The financial metrics were impressive, but what excited me most was the fundamental transformation we were enabling for our customers. DataBridge wasn't just another software tool, it was allowing companies to make data-driven decisions faster and more accurately than ever before. A retail client could now predict inventory needs with 94% accuracy instead of 73%. A manufacturing company could identify quality control issues in real time instead of discovering problems weeks later during routine audits. These improvements translated directly into bottom-line results for our customers, which made our software essential, rather than optional. Customer retention rates exceeded 98%, and expansion revenue, existing customers purchasing additional modules or expanding to new business units, accounted for 65% of our quarterly growth. The combination of strong financial performance, massive market opportunity, and proven customer success made Teknova an attractive candidate for an initial public offering. Investment banks began reaching out in early 2024, presenting detailed analyses of market conditions and potential valuation ranges. I spent months working with Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley, and JP Morgan to prepare for the IPO process. The work was exhaustive. Financial audits, legal documentation, regulatory filings, and investor presentations that had to tell our story convincingly to institutional investors who would ultimately determine our public market valuation. The preliminary S-1 filing we submitted to the Securities and Exchange Commission in August 2024 painted a compelling picture. Teknova was generating $180 million in annual recurring revenue, with 35% year-over-year growth rates. Our gross margins exceeded 85%, and we were achieving positive cash flow from operations despite continued investment in sales and marketing. Roadshow, a series of presentations to potential investors across major financial centers, was scheduled for September and October. We would visit New York, Boston, Chicago, San Francisco, Los Angeles, and London, meeting with pension funds, mutual fund managers, and other institutional investors who would purchase shares in the public offering. A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now back to where we left off. Based on preliminary feedback from the roadshow, the investment banks recommended pricing the IPO at $28 to $32 per share, which would value Teknova at approximately $2.8 billion and raise $280 million in new capital. The valuation represented a significant premium to comparable public companies, reflecting both our superior growth rates and the strategic importance of data integration in the modern enterprise software stack. Everything was proceeding according to plan. The S-1 filing had been declared effective by the SEC, meaning we could begin marketing the shares to investors. The roadshow presentations were generating strong interest from institutional investors, with preliminary indications suggesting we could price at the top of the range or potentially even higher. The final pricing meeting was scheduled for Tuesday afternoon, followed by the official launch of trading on Wednesday morning. After 7 years of building Teknova from a startup in a converted warehouse to a company valued at nearly $3 billion, We were less than 48 hours away from achieving one of the most significant milestones in corporate finance. That's when everything changed. The morning of the IPO pricing started like any other day that would change my life forever. I arrived at the office at 5:30 a.m., 2 hours before anyone else, clutching a venti coffee and carrying a leather portfolio containing the final pricing documents that would determine Teknova's public market debut. The Goldman Sachs team had worked through the night refining investor feedback from the roadshow. Early indications suggested overwhelming demand. Institutional investors had submitted orders for nearly $4.2 billion worth of shares, meaning we were oversubscribed by 500%. This level of demand typically indicated we could price above the initial range, potentially reaching $35 per share and pushing our total valuation toward $3.5 billion. I spent the first hour reviewing market conditions and competitor analysis. Snowflake's stock had gained 8% the previous day following strong quarterly earnings. Palantir announced a major government contract worth $180 million. The enterprise software sector was experiencing unprecedented investor enthusiasm, driven by accelerating digital transformation and artificial intelligence adoption across industries. My phone buzzed with a text from Bradley. Board meeting moved to 8 a.m. Need to discuss something important before the pricing call. An earlier board meeting wasn't unusual during IPO week. Last-minute adjustments to pricing strategy, final approvals for marketing materials, or updates on regulatory requirements were common. I gathered my documents and headed to the executive conference room on the 43rd floor. The atmosphere felt different the moment I walked in. Instead of the usual pre-IPO excitement, the room carried an uncomfortable tension. Board members avoided eye contact, shuffling papers and checking phones with unusual intensity. Bradley sat at the head of the table, his typically confident demeanor replaced by something I couldn't quite identify. Guilt, perhaps, or resignation. "Vanessa, thank you for joining us early," said Margaret Foster, our lead independent director and former CFO of Adobe. "We need to discuss some concerns that have come to our attention." "Concerns? 2 hours before pricing our IPO? What kind of concerns?" I asked, taking my usual seat across from Bradley. Margaret exchanged glances with David Kumar, our board chairman and managing partner at Sequoia Capital. "We've received information suggesting potential financial irregularities in recent quarterly reports. Specifically, questions about revenue recognition practices and the timing of certain contract bookings." The words hit me like a physical blow. Financial irregularities? Revenue recognition? I had personally overseen every aspect of our financial reporting for the past 3 years. Our accounting practices had been audited by Deloitte, reviewed by our legal counsel, and scrutinized by the SEC during the registration process. "I don't understand," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Our financial statements have been thoroughly reviewed by multiple parties. What specific irregularities are you referring to?" David leaned forward, his expression grave. "Yesterday evening, we received an anonymous tip alleging that certain enterprise contracts were backdated to inflate quarterly revenue numbers. The tipster claims to have documentation showing that at least $12 million in revenue was improperly recognized in Q2 and Q3. Anonymous tip? The timing was impossibly suspicious. Why would someone wait until the day of our IPO pricing to raise these concerns? And who would have access to detailed contract information besides our own employees? That's completely false, I said, my professional composure beginning to crack. Every contract in our system includes timestamps, electronic signatures, and approval workflows that create an immutable audit trail. It would be impossible to backdate contracts without leaving digital evidence. "We understand your position," Margaret said, "but we can't ignore these allegations. The potential legal exposure if we proceed with the IPO while under investigation could be catastrophic." Investigation? They were talking about an investigation based on an anonymous tip received less than 24 hours ago? Has anyone actually reviewed the supposed evidence? I asked. Have you contacted our legal counsel? Or auditors? This sounds like a deliberate attempt to sabotage our public offering. Bradley finally spoke, his voice lacking its usual authority. Vanessa, we've made the difficult decision to postpone the IPO pending a thorough investigation of these allegations. We've already contacted our attorneys and will be conducting a comprehensive review of all financial records. Postpone the IPO? The roadshow had generated tremendous investor interest. Market conditions were optimal. We had spent months preparing for this moment, and now they wanted to stop everything based on unsubstantiated allegations from an anonymous source? This is insane, I said, standing up from my chair. Who benefits from delaying our IPO? Who has access to detailed contract information? This has to be coming from inside the company. The room fell silent. Board members studied their hands, avoiding my gaze. The silence stretched uncomfortably until David cleared his throat. Vanessa, there's something else we need to discuss. Given the seriousness of these allegations and your role in overseeing financial operations, the board has decided it would be appropriate for you to step aside temporarily while the investigation is conducted. Step aside? They were removing me from my position as CFO? You're suspending me based on anonymous allegations that you haven't even bothered to investigate? My voice was rising despite my efforts to remain professional. It's not a suspension, Margaret said quickly. It's a temporary leave of absence with full pay and benefits. Once the investigation is complete and these issues are resolved, we'll reassess the situation. The corporate euphemisms couldn't disguise what was happening. They were removing me from my position 2 hours before the biggest moment of my career, based on what could only be described as a coordinated attack on my professional reputation. I want to see this supposed evidence, I demanded. I want to know who made these allegations and what specific contracts they're questioning. That's not possible at this time, David said. The investigation needs to proceed independently to maintain objectivity. Objectivity? They were willing to torpedo a $2.8 billion IPO based on anonymous accusations, but they were concerned about objectivity? I looked around the table at people I had worked with for years. Margaret, who had mentored me through the challenges of becoming a public company CFO. David, who had personally recruited me to Technova and supported my promotions. Board members who had praised my financial stewardship just weeks earlier during roadshow preparations. Who's going to handle the IPO pricing if I'm removed? I asked. We've asked Jonathan Walsh from Goldman Sachs to work directly with Bradley on the financial aspects, Margaret said. The IPO will proceed once these matters are resolved. Jonathan Walsh? He was a competent investment banker, but he didn't know the intricate details of our business model, customer contracts, or competitive positioning. The idea that he could effectively manage investor relations during a public offering was absurd. The meeting concluded with instructions for me to clean out my office and surrender my access credentials. Security would escort me from the building within the hour. My 7 years of building Technova's financial foundation, my expertise in enterprise software markets, my relationships with investors and customers, none of it mattered anymore. Walking back to my office, I tried to process what had just happened. The timing was too convenient, the allegations too specific, and the board's response too swift and coordinated. Someone had orchestrated this attack, and they had inside knowledge of our operations. I began thinking about who had access to detailed contract information. The finance team, obviously, but they worked directly for me and had no motive to sabotage the IPO. The legal team reviewed all major contracts, but they were external counsel with no reason to undermine the company. The sales team managed customer relationships, but their compensation was tied to the success of the IPO. Then it hit me. There was one person who had access to everything: financial records, contract details, board communications, and strategic plans. Someone who had been conspicuously absent from the morning's board meeting, despite being copied on all IPO-related communications. Jessica Crawford, our Chief Operating Officer. Jessica had joined Technova 18 months earlier, recruited from Oracle, where she had been VP of Strategic Operations. Her hiring had been Bradley's decision, made without input from the existing executive team. She brought impressive credentials: Stanford MBA, previous experience at McKinsey & Company, and a track record of scaling enterprise software companies. From the beginning, Jessica had positioned herself as Bradley's strategic advisor, inserting herself into decisions that traditionally fell under other executives' purview. She questioned marketing strategies developed by our CMO, suggested changes to product roadmaps created by our engineering team, and frequently challenged financial projections I had spent weeks developing. Her criticism was always framed as constructive feedback, but there was an underlying pattern of undermining other executives' authority while positioning herself as the solution to problems she had identified. Bradley seemed impressed by her analytical approach and willingness to challenge conventional thinking. Over the past 6 months, Jessica had become increasingly involved in IPO preparations. She attended roadshow planning meetings, reviewed investor presentation materials, and participated in financial modeling sessions. Her access to sensitive information had expanded significantly as we approached the public offering. But what would motivate her to sabotage the IPO? The answer became clear as I cleaned out my desk drawers and packed personal belongings into cardboard boxes. Jessica's equity stake in Technova was significantly smaller than other executives who had been with the company longer. If the IPO succeeded, she would benefit financially, but not to the same extent as founders and early employees. However, if the IPO was delayed and the company faced internal turmoil, there might be an opportunity for her to increase her influence and equity position. A restructuring of the executive team could result in expanded responsibilities and additional stock options. If key executives were removed during the investigation, she could position herself as essential to the company's stability and future success. The plan was brilliant in its simplicity. Create enough doubt about financial practices to delay the IPO without actually destroying the company's long-term prospects. Remove the CFO who had the knowledge and credibility to expose the false allegations. Position herself as the executive capable of cleaning up the mess and restoring investor confidence. My phone buzzed with an email from IT support. Your access credentials have been deactivated effective immediately. Please surrender all company devices to security. I looked around my office one last time. The wall displayed framed certificates marking Technova's major milestones: our first $1 million in revenue, the Series A funding announcement, customer awards, and industry recognition. Photos from company events showed the team celebrating achievements we had built together over 7 years. Security arrived at 3:30 p.m. 2 guards in corporate blazers waited while I finished packing, then escorted me to the elevator and down to the parking garage. The walk felt surreal. Employees I had worked with for years pretended not to notice as I passed their desks carrying boxes of personal belongings. In the parking garage, I sat in my car for several minutes, trying to process the magnitude of what had just happened. The IPO pricing call was scheduled to begin in 15 minutes. Institutional investors were expecting to purchase shares in a company they believed was led by a stable, experienced management team. Instead, they would learn that the CFO had been removed under suspicious circumstances just hours before the offering. The impact on Technova's valuation would be devastating. Investors would demand significant discounts to account for the uncertainty and potential legal exposure. The $2.8 billion valuation we had worked so hard to achieve would likely drop to $2 billion or less, assuming the IPO proceeded at all. My personal financial loss was staggering. The 1.2% equity stake I had earned through 7 years of building, the company would be worth $33.6 million at the original IPO price. If the valuation dropped to $2 billion, my stake would be worth $24 million. If the IPO was canceled entirely, My options could become worthless if the company's private market valuation declined due to the controversy. But the financial loss, devastating as it was, hurt less than the betrayal by people I had trusted and respected. Bradley, who had given me my first opportunity in the industry, had sat silently while the board destroyed my reputation. Board members who had praised my work for years had accepted anonymous allegations without question. The drive home took 45 minutes through Austin traffic, giving me time to think about my options. I could hire attorneys and fight the allegations, but legal battles were expensive and time-consuming. I could try to find another CFO position, but the controversy would follow me regardless of the investigation's outcome. Or I could do something that would shock everyone involved. As I pulled into my driveway, my phone rang. The caller ID showed a number I recognized but hadn't expected. Marcus Chen, CEO of Dataflow Systems. Dataflow was Technova's primary competitor, a Seattle-based company that offered similar data integration solutions for enterprise customers. Marcus was known throughout the industry as a brilliant strategist and aggressive competitor who had built Dataflow from a small consulting firm into a $900 million company in just 5 years. Vanessa, Marcus said when I answered. I heard about what happened today. I wanted to reach out personally. News traveled fast in the tight-knit enterprise software community. Word of my removal from Technova had probably reached key industry executives within hours. I appreciate the call, Marcus, but I'm not sure what there is to discuss. Actually, there's quite a bit to discuss. I think you might be interested in a conversation about the future, both yours and the industry's. Are you available for dinner tonight? The suggestion was unexpected but intriguing. Marcus Chen wasn't known for social calls or casual dinner invitations. If he wanted to meet, he had something specific in mind. Where did you have in mind? I asked. There's a private dining room at the Driscoll Hotel, 8 o'clock. And Vanessa, bring your appetite for more than just food. We're going to talk about changing everything. The Driscoll Hotel's private dining room occupied a corner of the historic building's second floor, overlooking 6th Street through tall windows draped in burgundy velvet. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over mahogany paneling and oil paintings depicting Texas landscapes from the 1800s. It was the kind of room where oil barons and cattle ranchers had once negotiated deals that shaped the state's economy. Marcus Chen arrived precisely at 8 o'clock, dressed in a charcoal gray suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. At 42, he possessed the confident bearing of someone who had built a technology empire through strategic brilliance and calculated risk-taking. His handshake was firm, his smile genuine but calculating. Vanessa, thank you for coming. I know today has been challenging. We settled into leather chairs across from each other at a table set for 2. A server appeared immediately, presenting menus and offering wine selections. Marcus ordered a bottle of Caymus Cabernet without consulting me, a presumptuous gesture that somehow felt appropriate given the circumstances. I'll be direct, Marcus said once we were alone. What happened to you today was orchestrated by someone who understands exactly how to manipulate corporate governance during critical moments. The timing, the anonymous allegations, the board's swift response, none of that was coincidental. His words confirmed what I had suspected during the drive home. You think Jessica Crawford is behind this? I don't think it. I know it. Jessica reached out to Dataflow 6 weeks ago through intermediaries, suggesting we might be interested in acquiring certain Technova assets if the company faced financial difficulties. She provided detailed information about your customer contracts, revenue projections, and potential vulnerabilities in your business model. The wine arrived, and Marcus performed the tasting ritual with practiced efficiency. As the server filled our glasses, I processed what he had just revealed. Jessica hadn't just sabotaged the IPO, she had been planning this for over a month, potentially setting up Technova for acquisition by its primary competitor. She was shopping the company to you? I asked. Not exactly. She was positioning herself. as a valuable asset who could facilitate a strategic transaction. Jessica understands that Dataflow has been looking for opportunities to expand our market presence and eliminate competitive threats. A distressed acquisition of Technova would accomplish both objectives while providing her with significant personal upside. The appetizers arrived: oysters Rockefeller and seared foie gras that neither of us touched. My mind was racing through the implications of what Marcus had shared. If Jessica was working with Dataflow, the anonymous tip to the board was just the opening move in a larger strategy. What kind of personal upside? I asked. Jessica proposed joining Dataflow as Chief Strategy Officer with a compensation package that would make her one of the highest-paid executives in the enterprise software industry. Stock options, performance bonuses, and a guaranteed golden parachute if the integration doesn't succeed. The audacity was breathtaking. Jessica had systematically undermined Technova's IPO, destroyed my career, and positioned herself to profit from the company's distress by joining its primary competitor. The plan demonstrated a sophisticated understanding of corporate finance, strategic timing, and human psychology. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. "Dataflow benefits if Technova's IPO fails, and the company becomes available for acquisition at a discounted price." Marcus leaned back in his chair, studying me with the intensity of someone evaluating a potential business partner. "Because I have a different proposal, one that doesn't involve acquiring a damaged company or rewarding executives who demonstrate questionable loyalty." The server returned to clear our untouched appetizers and present the main courses: grilled lamb with rosemary reduction and pan-seared halibut with lemon beurre blanc. The presentation was exquisite, but my appetite had disappeared entirely. What kind of proposal? Dataflow is preparing for our own IPO in the next 18 months. We've been working with Credit Suisse and Deutsche Bank on preliminary planning, but we need someone with recent experience navigating the public markets. Someone who understands both the technical aspects of enterprise software and the financial sophistication required for a successful offering. He was offering me a job, not just any job. He was offering me the opportunity to lead Dataflow's IPO after being removed from Technova's just hours earlier. "You want me to become Dataflow's CFO?" "I want you to become Dataflow's CFO and help us execute the most successful enterprise software IPO in history. Our preliminary projections suggest we could achieve a $4.5 billion valuation, significantly higher than Technova's target." The irony was overwhelming. Jessica's scheme to destroy my career had inadvertently created an opportunity that could be even more lucrative than the position I had lost. Dataflow's larger scale and stronger market position meant their IPO could generate substantially more value than Technova's offering. "What makes you think Dataflow can achieve a higher valuation than Technova?" I asked. Marcus smiled, the expression of someone who had been waiting for exactly this question. 3 reasons. First, our customer base is more diversified. Technova relies heavily on mid-market clients, while Dataflow serves Fortune 100 companies with multi-year contracts averaging $2.3 million annually. Second, our technology platform is more mature and scalable. We've solved integration challenges that Technova is still working through. Third, our international presence gives us access to European and Asian markets that Technova hasn't penetrated. He wasn't wrong. During my years at Technova, I had studied Dataflow's financial performance and strategic positioning extensively. Their revenue growth was slightly slower than ours, but their profit margins were higher, and their customer retention rates were superior. They had established partnerships with major consulting firms like Accenture and Deloitte, creating distribution channels that Technova lacked. "What about the competitive implications?" I asked. "If I joined Dataflow, Technova could claim I'm sharing proprietary information or violating non-compete agreements." "Your non-compete clause specifically prohibits you from working for direct competitors in similar roles for 12 months. However, it includes an exception for situations where your previous employer terminates your employment without cause. Since Technova removed you based on unsubstantiated allegations rather than performance issues, the non-compete is likely unenforceable. Marcus had clearly researched the legal implications before extending his offer. His attorneys had probably reviewed my employment contract and identified the specific provision that would allow me to join Dataflow immediately. Even if the non-compete doesn't apply, there are ethical considerations, I said. I have 7 years of institutional knowledge about Technova's strategy, customer relationships, and competitive vulnerabilities. I'm not asking you to share proprietary information about Technova. I'm asking you to help Dataflow become the dominant player in the data integration market through superior execution and strategic planning. Your knowledge of public market requirements, investor relations, and IPO processes is exactly what we need. The distinction was important but subtle. Marcus wasn't proposing corporate espionage or theft of trade secrets. He was offering me the opportunity to apply my expertise in financial management and strategic planning to help Dataflow achieve its own objectives. What kind of compensation package are we discussing? I asked. Marcus reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew a single sheet of paper, a term sheet outlining Dataflow's offer. The numbers were staggering. Base salary of $485,000, annual bonus potential of up to $300,000, and stock options representing 0.8% of the company's equity. If Dataflow achieved the $4.5 billion IPO valuation Marcus had mentioned, my equity stake would be worth $36 million, more than I would have earned from Technova's offering even at the original $2.8 billion target price. The options vest over 4 years with a 1-year cliff, Marcus explained. But there's an acceleration clause if we complete a successful IPO within 24 months. In that scenario, half of your options vest immediately upon the public offering. The acceleration clause was particularly attractive. If Dataflow could execute their IPO quickly and successfully, I would receive $18 million in immediate value plus the potential for additional gains as the stock appreciated in public markets. When would you need an answer? I asked. Tonight. The urgency was surprising but understandable. If Marcus was serious about competing directly with Technova for market leadership, speed was essential. Every day, Technova remained in turmoil due to the investigation that gave Dataflow advantages in customer acquisition and strategic positioning. Why the rush? Because tomorrow morning, Jessica Crawford is going to propose that Technova's board consider strategic alternatives, including a potential merger with Dataflow. She'll argue that the company can't proceed with the IPO given the financial irregularities investigation, and that a strategic transaction represents the best way to preserve shareholder value. Marcus had access to Jessica's timeline and strategy, which meant their conversations had been more detailed than he had initially suggested. Dataflow wasn't just aware of Jessica's scheme, they were actively participating in it. "You're working with her," I said. "We've had preliminary discussions about potential strategic combinations, but Jessica's approach involves damaging Technova's value proposition and then acquiring the company at a discount. My preference is to compete directly and win through superior performance rather than corporate manipulation." The distinction mattered enormously. One approach involved rewarding an executive who had betrayed her own company, while the other involved competing fairly for market dominance. One approach would make me complicit in Jessica's scheme, while the other would give me the opportunity to outperform the company that had betrayed me. "If I join Dataflow, what happens to Technova?" I asked. "That depends on how well they execute their recovery strategy. If they can resolve the investigation quickly and restore investor confidence, they might still be able to proceed with the IPO. If the controversy persists, they'll face increasing pressure to consider strategic alternatives. And if they pursue the merger with Dataflow, then we'll evaluate the opportunity based on market conditions and strategic fit. But I'd rather build Dataflow into a company that doesn't need acquisitions to achieve market leadership." The server returned to check on our progress, noting that neither of us had touched our entrees. Marcus declined dessert and ordered coffee for both of us, clearly expecting our conversation to continue for some time. "There's one more thing you should know," Marcus said once we were alone again. Technova's board meeting this afternoon didn't go as Jessica expected. Bradley pushed back against the decision to postpone the IPO, arguing that the allegations were too vague and poorly sourced to justify such a drastic response. This was new information. If Bradley was defending the IPO timeline, perhaps the situation at Technova wasn't as dire as it had seemed this morning. What was the outcome? The board agreed to proceed with a modified timeline. Instead of pricing tonight, they'll spend the next 48 hours conducting an expedited investigation. If they can't find evidence supporting the allegations, they'll price the IPO on Thursday evening for Friday trading. 48 hours. If Technova could demonstrate that the financial irregularities allegations were false, they might still be able to complete their public offering. The delay would cost them some momentum and possibly require pricing at a discount, but the fundamental opportunity would remain intact. "Does this change your offer?" I asked. "Not at all. If anything, it makes the opportunity more compelling. If Technova completes their IPO successfully, they'll have additional resources to compete aggressively for market share. Data flow needs to be prepared for an escalated competitive battle, which makes having an experienced CFO even more critical." Marcus was right. Whether Technova succeeded or failed with their IPO, the competitive dynamics in the data integration market were about to intensify dramatically. The company that executed more effectively over the next 2 years would establish market leadership that could last for decades. I looked at the term sheet again, studying the compensation details and equity provisions. The financial opportunity was extraordinary, but the decision involved more than money. This was about choosing between loyalty to people who had betrayed me and seizing an opportunity to demonstrate my capabilities on a larger stage. "I need to understand one thing clearly," I said. "Are you offering me this position because you believe I can help Dataflow succeed, or because you want to damage Technova by removing their CFO?" Marcus met my gaze directly, his expression serious. "I'm offering you this position because Dataflow needs the best possible financial leadership to achieve our strategic objectives. The fact that your former colleagues demonstrated poor judgment in how they treated you is unfortunate, but it's not why I want you on my team." The answer felt genuine, but I needed to be certain about the ethical implications of accepting his offer. If I join Dataflow, I won't share proprietary information about Technova's business operations, customer relationships, or strategic plans. My contribution will be based entirely on my general expertise in financial management and public market transactions. I wouldn't expect anything else. Dataflow will succeed because we execute better than our competitors, not because we have access to their confidential information. The coffee arrived in delicate china cups, accompanied by small plates of petit fours that we both ignored. The conversation had reached its critical moment, the point where I needed to decide whether to accept Marcus's offer or walk away. The rational decision was obvious. Dataflow offered superior financial opportunity, better strategic positioning, and the chance to work with a CEO who valued my expertise rather than questioning my integrity. The company was larger, more mature, and better positioned for a successful IPO than Technova had ever been. But accepting the offer meant abandoning any possibility of returning to Technova if the investigation cleared my name. It meant competing directly against former colleagues and customers I had worked with for 7 years. It meant embracing the role of rival rather than seeking reconciliation. "I accept your offer," I said. Marcus smiled and extended his hand across the table. "Welcome to Dataflow, Vanessa. We're going to change this industry forever." Dataflow's headquarters occupied 15 floors of a gleaming glass tower in Seattle's South Lake Union District, 3 blocks from Amazon's sprawling campus. The building's modern architecture featured floor-to-ceiling windows, open collaborative spaces, and technology infrastructure that supported over 800 employees across engineering, sales, marketing, and operations. I arrived at 6:30 a.m. on Thursday morning, exactly 12 hours after accepting Marcus's offer. The previous evening had been spent reviewing Dataflow's confidential financial documents, organizational charts, and strategic planning materials that Marcus's team had couriered to my hotel room. The due diligence package was comprehensive: 3 years of audited financial statements, customer contract summaries, competitive analysis reports, and preliminary IPO planning documents. Dataflow's financial performance was impressive. Annual recurring revenue of $340 million with 28% year-over-year growth. Gross margins of 89%, significantly higher than Technova's 85%. Customer retention rates exceeding 96%, with expansion revenue representing 71% of quarterly growth. The company was generating positive cash flow while investing heavily in product development and international expansion. More importantly, Dataflow's market position was stronger than I had realized during my years focusing on Technova's competitive landscape. They served 150 enterprise customers, including 40 Fortune 500 companies. Average contract values exceeded $2.3 million annually, with several customers paying over $5 million per year for enterprise-wide implementations across multiple business units and geographic regions. The technology platform was more sophisticated than Technova's offering. Dataflow's engineers had solved complex integration challenges related to real-time data synchronization, automated schema mapping, and cross-platform security protocols that Technova was still developing. Their product roadmap included artificial intelligence capabilities that could predict integration failures and automatically optimize data flows based on usage patterns. Marcus met me in the executive conference room on the 30th floor, accompanied by 3 other senior leaders: Sandra Williams, Chief Technology Officer, Robert Kim, Chief Revenue Officer, and Lisa Chen, General Counsel. The introductions were brief and professional, focused on establishing working relationships rather than social pleasantries. "Vanessa, we have approximately 6 hours before Technova's board meeting concludes," Marcus said, consulting his watch. "If they decide to proceed with their IPO tomorrow, we need to be prepared to accelerate our own timeline significantly." The competitive implications were clear. 2 major data integration companies going public within weeks of each other would create direct comparison opportunities for investors. Institutional fund managers would evaluate relative market positions, growth trajectories, and management capabilities before deciding how to allocate their enterprise software investments. "What's our current IPO timeline?" I asked. "We've been planning for Q2 next year," Sandra said. "But Marcus thinks we should consider moving to Q4 this year if market conditions remain favorable." Q4 meant October or November, just 4 to 5 months away. Executing an IPO in that time frame would require extraordinary coordination between multiple teams: financial preparation, legal documentation, regulatory filings, and investor marketing. Most companies spent 8 to 12 months preparing for public offerings of this magnitude. "That's an aggressive timeline," I said. "What stage are the preparations currently in?" Lisa opened a thick binder containing legal documents and regulatory filings. "We've completed preliminary S1 drafts but haven't submitted anything to the SEC. Our auditors finished the 3-year financial review last month. We have engagement letters signed with Credit Suisse and Deutsche Bank as lead underwriters." The foundation was solid, but significant work remained. SEC registration statements required exhaustive disclosure about business operations, risk factors, competitive positioning, and executive compensation. The review process typically took 3 to 4 months, including multiple rounds of comments and revisions. "We need to file the initial S1 within 30 days to make a Q4 offering possible," Robert said. "That means completing management discussion sections, finalizing risk factor disclosures, and preparing use of proceeds statements by early August." I spent the next 2 hours reviewing Dataflow's draft S1 registration statement. The document was well-structured, but needed substantial refinement to tell a compelling story to potential investors. The business description section focused, too, heavily on technical capabilities rather than customer value propositions. The competitive analysis understated Dataflow's advantages while overemphasizing market risks. Most critically, the financial discussion section lacked the narrative framework that institutional investors expected. Numbers alone weren't sufficient. Public market investors wanted to understand the strategic logic behind revenue growth, margin expansion, and cash flow generation. They needed confidence that management could continue delivering strong performance. After going public, "Your revenue growth story is compelling, but the presentation needs improvement," I told the team. "Investors want to see clear connections between strategic initiatives and financial results. The current draft reads like an academic research report rather than an investment opportunity." Sandra nodded. "What specific changes would you recommend?" I pulled out a legal pad and began sketching a revised narrative structure. Start with the macro trend. Enterprises are drowning in data from disparate sources and need integration solutions to remain competitive. Then explain how Dataflow's technology platform addresses this need more effectively than alternatives. Support each capability claim with specific customer examples and quantified business impact. For instance, instead of saying Dataflow enables real-time data synchronization, say Dataflow's real-time synchronization capabilities helped Merck reduce drug development cycle times by 18% while improving regulatory compliance across 12 international markets. The difference was subtle, but important. Generic capability statements could apply to any competitor, while specific customer outcomes demonstrated unique value that justified premium pricing and customer loyalty. Marcus's assistant interrupted our discussion with an urgent message. "Bradley Morrison from Technova is holding a press conference at 2 p.m. He's expected to announce the results of their internal investigation." The timing was significant. Technova's board meeting had been scheduled to conclude by noon, giving Bradley 2 hours to prepare public statements about their IPO decision. A press conference suggested they had reached definitive conclusions about the financial irregularities allegations. "Do we know what he's planning to announce?" Marcus asked. "Our sources suggest the investigation found no evidence supporting the anonymous allegations," his assistant replied. "Technova is expected to proceed with IPO pricing this evening." The news was both expected and problematic. If Technova successfully refuted the sabotage allegations, they would proceed with their public offering as originally planned. The delayed timeline might force them to accept a lower valuation, but they would still access public markets before Dataflow could complete its own preparations. "Change of plans," Marcus said. "We're going to watch Bradley's press conference together, then make final decisions about our IPO timeline." The executive conference room's large display screen showed Technova's Austin headquarters, where a modest crowd of technology journalists and financial analysts had gathered in the lobby. Bradley appeared at 2:03 p.m., flanked by Margaret Foster and David Kumar from the board of directors. His expression was confident but serious, the demeanor of someone delivering important news about the company's future. "Thank you for joining us on short notice," Bradley began. "Yesterday, Technova's board of directors received anonymous allegations questioning certain financial reporting practices. We took these allegations seriously and immediately launched a comprehensive investigation led by independent legal counsel and our external auditors." He paused, consulting notes before continuing. "After a thorough review of all relevant financial records, contract documentation, and accounting procedures, the investigation found no evidence supporting the allegations. Technova's financial statements are accurate, complete, and prepared, in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles." The first part of the announcement was predictable. The anonymous allegations had been too vague and poorly documented to withstand serious scrutiny. Jessica's scheme depended on creating temporary confusion rather than proving actual financial misconduct. Based on these findings, Technova's board has authorized management to proceed with our initial public offering. We will price the offering this evening and expect trading to commence tomorrow morning on the NASDAQ under the ticker symbol TNVA. Applause from the audience. Technova had survived the sabotage attempt and would proceed with their IPO as originally planned. The 24-hour delay would likely reduce their valuation somewhat, but the fundamental opportunity remained intact. However, Bradley continued, his tone becoming more serious, the investigation also revealed that the anonymous allegations originated from within Technova and were part of a coordinated effort to damage the company's public offering for personal gain. This was unexpected. I had assumed the investigation would focus on financial records rather than identifying the source of the allegations. Specifically, we determined that Jessica Crawford, Technova's chief operating officer, provided confidential information to competitors and made false statements about the company's financial practices. Ms. Crawford has been terminated immediately, and we are pursuing legal action for breach of fiduciary duty and corporate sabotage. The camera showed shocked expressions among the journalists. Corporate executives rarely made such direct accusations against former colleagues, especially during public announcements about IPO proceedings. Additionally, Bradley said, we learned that Ms. Crawford's actions were motivated by preliminary discussions with Dataflow Systems about potential strategic combinations that would have eliminated Technova as an independent company. These discussions occurred without board authorization and directly violated Ms. Crawford's duties as a corporate officer. Marcus muttered something under his breath that I couldn't quite hear. Bradley's announcement was more comprehensive than anyone had expected, and the direct reference to Dataflow was particularly problematic. Technova remains committed to competing vigorously in the data integration market as an independent public company. We believe our technology platform, customer relationships, and financial performance provide significant advantages over competitors who rely on corporate manipulation rather than product innovation. The final comment was clearly directed at Dataflow and Marcus personally. Bradley was positioning Technova's successful defense against Jessica's sabotage as evidence of superior corporate governance and ethical leadership. The press conference concluded with brief questions from journalists about the IPO pricing timeline and legal actions against Jessica. Bradley declined to provide specific details, but confirmed that Technova's attorneys were exploring all available remedies for the damage caused by her actions. Marcus turned off the display screen and looked around the conference room. The implications of Bradley's announcement were significant for Dataflow's competitive positioning and IPO planning. Well, Marcus said, that was more interesting than expected. How much of a problem is the public reference to our discussions? With Jessica? Lisa asked. Potentially significant, Marcus replied. If Technova's attorneys can demonstrate that Dataflow actively encouraged Jessica's sabotage efforts, we could face legal liability and regulatory scrutiny that would complicate our own IPO preparations. The legal risks were real but manageable, if handled properly. Dataflow's conversations with Jessica had focused on potential strategic combinations rather than specific sabotage activities. The company could argue that discussions about industry consolidation were normal business activities that didn't constitute conspiracy or corporate manipulation. What's our response strategy? Robert asked. Marcus was quiet for several moments, clearly evaluating multiple options. When he spoke, his voice carried the certainty of someone who had made a difficult decision. We're going to do exactly what I told Vanessa last night. Compete directly and win through superior execution. Dataflow will accelerate our IPO timeline to Q4 this year. We'll file our S-1 registration statement within 30 days and target pricing in early November. That puts us less than 6 months behind Technova, Sandra said. Institutional investors will have direct comparison opportunities between both companies. Exactly. And when they compare Dataflow's financial performance, customer base, and technology platform to Technova's, the choice will be obvious. Marcus turned to me, his expression intense. Vanessa, I need you to lead this effort. Full authority over financial preparation, investor relations, and strategic messaging. Whatever resources you need, whoever you need to hire, whatever external Support is required. It's yours. The mandate was broader than typical CFO responsibilities during IPO preparation. Marcus was essentially giving me control over all aspects of Dataflow's public market debut, with unlimited resources to execute the strategy. "When do we start?" I asked. "We already have. Lisa, I want draft S1 amendments on my desk by Monday morning incorporating Vanessa's narrative recommendations. Sandra, prepare detailed competitive analysis comparing our technology platform to Technova's current capabilities. Robert, start scheduling management presentation sessions with institutional investors for September." The room erupted in coordinated activity as each executive began planning their team's contributions to the accelerated timeline. Phone calls to legal counsel, financial advisors, and marketing agencies. Calendar invitations for strategy sessions and document review meetings. Email messages to team members outlining new priorities and deadlines. I pulled out my phone and composed a text message to my former assistant at Technova. "Congratulations on the successful IPO. Looking forward to competing in public markets." The message was professional, but carried an unmistakable subtext. Technova had survived Jessica's sabotage and would proceed with their public offering. Dataflow would follow 6 months later with a superior financial story and stronger competitive position. The real competition was just beginning. Marcus appeared beside my chair as I finished sending the message. "Any regrets about leaving Technova?" I looked around Dataflow's executive conference room, at the sophisticated technology infrastructure, the panoramic views of Seattle's skyline, and the team of experienced professionals preparing to execute one of the year's most significant IPO transactions. "None whatsoever," I said. "Let's show them how this is really done." November 8th arrived with the crisp clarity that only autumn in Seattle could provide. Standing on the trading floor of the NASDAQ market site in Times Square, I watched the digital displays countdown to 9:30 a.m., the moment Dataflow Systems would begin trading as a public company under the ticker DFLW. The previous 6 months had been a masterclass in strategic execution. Dataflow's S1 registration statement told a compelling story of technological superiority and financial discipline that institutional investors found irresistible. Our roadshow presentations drew standing room-only crowds in New York, Boston, and San Francisco, with portfolio managers asking detailed questions about competitive advantages and growth sustainability. The pricing meeting the night before had been extraordinary. Orders from institutional investors totaled $8.7 billion for an offering sized at $420 million, oversubscribed by more than 2,000%. Credit Suisse and Deutsche Bank recommended pricing at $42 per share, significantly above our initial range of $28 to $32. At $42 per share, Dataflow's market capitalization would reach $5.2 billion on the first day of trading, nearly double Technova's current valuation of $2.8 billion despite their successful IPO 6 months earlier. Marcus stood beside me on the trading floor, his usually composed demeanor betraying hints of nervous excitement. Sandra Williams, Robert Kim, and the rest of Dataflow's executive team clustered around monitors displaying pre-market trading data and institutional order flows. 30 seconds, announced the NASDAQ opening bell coordinator. The irony wasn't lost on me. 6 months ago, I had been fired from Technova 2 hours before their IPO pricing. Today, I was leading a larger, more successful public offering for their primary competitor. The stock options that Marcus had granted me in May were now worth $41.6 million at the IPO price, $8 million more than my original Technova equity would have generated, but the financial windfall paled in comparison to the professional vindication. Dataflow's IPO represented validation of strategic decisions, execution capabilities, and leadership qualities that Technova's board had questioned. The market was about to render its verdict on who had made the better choice. The opening bell rang at exactly 9:30 a.m. Dataflow's stock opened at $47 per share, 12% above the IPO price. indicating strong investor demand and confidence in the company's prospects. By 10:15 a.m., shares were trading at $52, giving Dataflow a market capitalization exceeding $6.4 billion. My phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "Congratulations on your success. You deserved better than what happened at Teknova. Bradley." The message was unexpected but appreciated. Bradley had been caught in an impossible situation when Jessica orchestrated her sabotage scheme. His decision to support the board's action hadn't been personal. It had been an attempt to protect the company's IPO in the face of what appeared to be credible allegations. Teknova's stock had performed respectably since their May IPO, gaining 18% from the initial 28-hour pricing to current levels around $33 per share. But their $3.3 billion market capitalization now looked modest compared to Dataflow's $6.4 billion valuation achieved on opening day. The market was sending a clear message about relative competitive positioning and growth prospects. Institutional. Investors valued Dataflow's superior technology platform, larger enterprise customer base, and stronger financial metrics. They also rewarded the company's clean execution of the IPO process without the drama and controversy that had marked Teknova's offering. Marcus appeared at my side as Dataflow's stock price reached $54 per share shortly before noon. "Any thoughts about what comes next?" he asked. The question was more complex than it seemed. Dataflow's successful IPO provided resources for accelerated product development, international expansion, and potential acquisitions. We could invest in artificial intelligence capabilities that would further differentiate our platform from competitors. We could establish direct sales operations in European and Asian markets that Teknova hadn't penetrated effectively. "We execute the growth strategy we outlined in the S1, I said. Expand internationally, develop next-generation AI features, and acquire complementary technologies that enhance our platform capabilities." "And Teknova?" I looked at the trading screens showing both companies' stock prices. Dataflow trading. At $54, up 29% from the IPO price. Teknova holding steady at $33, essentially unchanged from their opening levels 6 months earlier. "Teknova will compete as effectively as they can," I said. But markets don't lie. Investors have evaluated both companies and made their choice. The trading day concluded with Dataflow's stock closing at $51 per share, representing a 21% gain from the IPO price and establishing a market capitalization of $6.3 billion. The successful debut ranked among the best-performing enterprise software IPOs of the year. Walking back to our hotel that evening, Marcus and I passed the restaurant where we had first met 6 months earlier. The Driscoll Hotel seemed like a lifetime ago, though the fundamental dynamics hadn't changed. Successful companies required strategic vision, exceptional execution, and leadership teams capable of making difficult decisions under pressure. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if Teknova hadn't fired you?" Marcus asked. The counterfactual was interesting to consider. If Jessica's sabotage had failed, if the board had supported the original IPO timeline, if I had remained as Teknova's CFO through their public offering, the company might have achieved a higher valuation, retained institutional investor confidence, and maintained competitive momentum. But those scenarios assumed Teknova could have matched Dataflow's execution capabilities and strategic positioning, which seemed unlikely given their smaller scale and less sophisticated technology platform. Teknova made their choice when they removed me based on anonymous allegations, I said. Markets are remarkably efficient at identifying and rewarding superior performance. 6 months later, the industry landscape had been permanently altered. Dataflow's successful IPO attracted additional enterprise customers seeking best-in-class data integration solutions. Our stock price continued appreciating as quarterly earnings reports demonstrated sustained growth and expanding profit margins. Teknova remained a viable competitor, but struggled to match Dataflow's pace of innovation and market expansion. Their stock price stagnated around IPO levels, while investors questioned whether the company could achieve the growth rates necessary to justify their valuation. Jessica Crawford faced federal charges for corporate sabotage and securities fraud. Her scheme to profit from Teknova's distress had collapsed when the company successfully defended against her allegations and proceeded with their IPO. The legal proceedings would continue for years, but her career in technology was effectively over. Standing in Dataflow's Seattle headquarters 1 year after joining the company, I reflected on the unexpected journey that had brought me to this point. The betrayal that had seemed catastrophic at the time had actually created opportunities for greater success than I had originally imagined. Sometimes the worst things that happen to us become the catalysts for the best things that follow. The final irony came 18 months later when Dataflow acquired Teknova's European operations for $340 million, less than 10% of our market capitalization. The integration provided access to customers and technologies that accelerated our international expansion while eliminating a key competitor from critical markets. Bradley Morrison joined Dataflow's board of directors as part of the transaction, bringing his entrepreneurial experience and industry relationships to support our continued growth. During our first board meeting, he pulled me aside for a private conversation. "I owe you an apology for what happened during the IPO process," he said. "The board's decision was based on incomplete information and poor judgment." "No apology necessary," I replied. "Everything worked out exactly as it should have." And it had. Sometimes the universe has a way of correcting injustices and rewarding those who refuse to accept defeat. Sometimes getting fired becomes the best thing that ever happened to your career. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.